All right, folks, we're out here in the winter woods in North Idaho, and we're going to experiment with a fire technique that I think is going to have a lot of applicability to spending the night in the woods with very minimal gear. This is basically a wall of fire, a stacked log fire. But the first thing we got to do is go find a suitable tree. So I've got a little standing dead Doug fir here. It's about 9 inches diameter. We're gonna go ahead and cut this and use it for our stacked fire. If this thing doesn't fall the way you think it is, the last thing you want is a bunch of brush around the bottom side of it that you're gonna get tangled up in. So if I had a chainsaw, I would take a wedge out of the bottom side of this tree, lining up in the direction that I want it to fall. But that's a lot more cutting than I want to do with this little bow saw. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it from the back and let the lean of this tree take it over that way. So I'm about maxed out on my bow saw, the depth that I can go in this tree. I'm having to kind of work around. Oh! And that went exactly where I did not want it to go. All right, so now I got a problem to deal with. I got this tree kind of hung up in some branches over there. I don't think it'd be too much of a problem, but had I been less lazy or had a bigger saw, I could have avoided this just by making a face cut and then coming in from the back and leaving a hinge of wood right here. You can actually be very, very accurate in where you fall trees based on the way that that hinge is oriented. I'm going to show you an example of falling some bigger trees when we're cutting firewood, just so you can get an idea how it's supposed to be done. There we go. So I see these things all over YouTube, but very few people give the details about how to build them. What are the nuances to really make this thing work? So in one of my recent videos, I talked just briefly about how I sometimes get hate mail for cutting down small live trees, and I gave kind of a quick little justification for why you might want to do that and how that can actually help the health of the forest. But I wanted to take this as an example to kind of expand on that idea a little bit. So if you look around this little section of forest, there's actually quite a few dead snags, kind of like this Doug fir that I cut down here. And the reason that they're dead is because they're stressed. And they're stressed because they're growing too closely together. There's a lot of trees in here, and these smaller ones are getting out-competed by these larger trees. And so This can create some problems for the forest because when trees are stressed, it's just like when we're stressed. It opens us up to infection from the outside or diseases, and that can create all kinds of problems in the forest. That's one of the reasons why we have such massive wildfires, especially in the western US. And so by thinning out a forest a little bit, you really can improve the health of the forest. Now, with that said, having some standing dead snags in a forest is actually a really good thing because it provides wildlife habitat. It provides areas for things like woodpeckers to excavate cavities, and that provides nesting areas for not only woodpeckers, but all kinds of birds. Red squirrels will use them, northern flying squirrels will use them, and so they're really good features to have on the landscape. And so when I'm looking for a snag to cut down, either for something like this or for firewood to heat our home, I'm really careful to select trees that don't have those cavities in them. For those of you who have followed my content for a while, you'll know that I am a wildlife biologist, and so I kind of geek out on these things. That's enough of that. Let's go make a fire. So one of the big problems that I see people having with this type of fire is that they light their fire right in the middle, and the middle burns out and the ends sit on the log. The top log just sits on the bottom log, and you end up with this big oval that's burned out of the middle, and eventually those pieces of wood burn apart so far that there's not enough heat to keep that fire going, and it ends up going out. And so by starting the fires on the end, I'm thinking that I can avoid that. They're going to come together eventually, so I'm thinking this is going to burn towards the center of the log, and hopefully this thing burns evenly and just keeps burning down on itself like it's supposed to. But we'll see. So I'm using fat wood to get this going, which is probably the best natural fire starter out there, aside from perhaps paper birch bark. This stuff will light in any conditions and burn for quite some time. So I've got two goals with this experiment here. Number one, I want to see if I can get this thing to burn evenly all the way across and just sandwich down on itself evenly until the logs burn out like it's supposed to. Number two, I want to see how long this thing burns for. Now, the burn time, of course, is going to depend on what type of log it is, the moisture content, the diameter. There's a lot of things that are going to factor into this, but this is going to give me a baseline for kind of making assumptions on how long a fire is going to burn in other conditions. All right, so we're closing in on what feels like to be about 2 hours or so. Everything seems to be working the way that it's supposed to work. It's just full of coals and embers between the two logs. It's putting out a good bit of heat. Got one little hump right here in the middle that's just kind of holding a little bit of a gap and allowing things to burn. So that's slowly moving in and slowly burning away. And then what I'm thinking is as that burns away, these logs are just going to settle a little bit closer together, and that's going to hopefully keep those embers going. So to get this fire to this point, it's actually required a fair bit of maintenance. But I'm hoping that now that everything is burning pretty evenly, I'm hoping that it's going to be a relatively maintenance-free fire. So I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, I did a video on a Siberian log fire, which worked fantastic. It was one of those long burning, relatively maintenance-free fires that just pumped out a ton of heat all night long. That Siberian log fire would work very, very well in a situation where you were stuck out overnight, didn't have the proper gear, didn't have a sleeping bag. It puts out that much heat, and I'm hoping that this is going to perform similar to that. So I'm pretty impressed with how evenly this thing's burning. I've got one little lump right here in the middle, but both sides are very even. I've got a piece of green aspen stuck down on that end because that end is a little bit heavy, and if I didn't have it there, it would just kind of fall that way, have a big gap here and no gap down there. But everything seems to be working out great. So it's putting off just enough heat that I can feel it from about 2.5, 3 feet away. And so I'm thinking that I might give this a try later on where I build 2 of these, maybe 7 feet long, and just sleep in between them. I think that if it continues to burn like this, that would be a great way to spend a night out, a cold night out without a sleeping bag. So I think I'm just going to let the time lapse take over, and we're just going to watch it and just see how long it goes. Then I'll come back out here in the morning and take a look and see what it looks like. Oh, man. So I started this fire at 3:45 yesterday afternoon. It's now 2 a.m. and it's raining. I haven't touched this thing since around 8 o'clock last night. My supports have fallen down. They've burned through, all except for this one right here. It looks like it just recently fell down, but it is still cranking out some heat. It looks like it just kind of self-fed, just kind of kept going down, and then didn't fall down until my supports burned through. So it's 8 o'clock the next morning, fire's still going. I just rekindled the coals that were left. So a couple observations on this. It burned for probably 8 to 10 hours before the aspen uprights gave way and the fire just kind of collapsed. But if I had replaced these, they would still be up right now, and this thing, instead of falling over like it did, it just would have kept burning down and just self-fed all night. So at first I was a little bit concerned that the ends were burning too fast and it just wasn't burning in the middle, but it eventually just kind of slowly burned into the middle and worked out perfectly. So I've got plans yet this winter to get out in the woods and give this thing a go for real. If you want to see that and other winter survival content, be sure to subscribe. Click that little bell icon so you get notified, and we'll see you on the next one.